All right, and then let's see. Everything good? Everybody happy? Welcome back, guys. We're doing a little something different than you're probably used to. We're going to do a live video podcast of my new podcast, theboomdonepodcast.com. You can go there and subscribe to my new podcast. Again, this is pretty late at night. Trust me, I just got this cool stuff set up in the shop here and figured it'd be kind of a cool looking podcast studio. So I figured I'd bring you guys along as I can now switch between this and this. So what to expect? This is just going to be another video series. Imagine just like anything else I've been doing for years. A little something different, but I think you're going to enjoy. So without further ado, let's kick this thing into high gear. Where there's problems, we have solutions. There's always another way or a better way. Then there's my way, the Boom Done way. Welcome to the Boom Done Podcast with your host, Bo Safeguard. Well, howdy, everybody. This is Bo. Welcome back to the Boom Done Podcast, brought to you by, well, let's see today. I think it's a little Smoky Joe from Isley Whiskey. Quite good. That is definitely not a sponsor, but you know what? It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if I got a sponsorship from a whiskey company. So what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about the Video Podcast Strategy Guide. Now, why would you care about video podcasting in the first place? You're already doing a podcast and you're listening to this. So there's both the audio file that you've been listening to as well as now we're going to be putting up a video. So you can see video on my main YouTube channel at crossbowgaming.com or YouTube and look for Bo's AFK, one of those two. Why do that? Well, I have 162,000 subscribers, so it seems a little silly not to use that if I have it at my disposal. So anyway, let's see what we got going down. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the strategy that I'm using for my video podcast strategy. Well, that's the name of the thing. Now, why would you want to do a video podcast as well as a regular podcast? Well, there's some really, really good reasons. Now, imagine you're a fisherman and you have the option of having one hook, or you could have like multiple hooks. You want to do multiple hooks. It's the same strategy I used on YouTube for years, right? You don't just have one video on YouTube and call it good, right? I've got like 1,800 videos on YouTube. And that's why I'm like, oh, great. There's 1,800 possibilities I could potentially will be able to grab somebody and put them into, do things with them, which is exactly what I want. I want them to watch my videos. And if they find one video, then they go to the next. Well, this is exactly what I'll be doing, but with the podcast world. So for this one, right, what we're going to go through is I've got 8 different kind of levels or strategy things I want to cover as to why and what. So we're going to set up why even do a podcast in the first place. Like, what should you care about? How do you set it up? Is there a style? Is there some kind of way to release? How do you market a podcast? You got to kind of know that it's a whole different game, right? So on YouTube, I'm used to seeing like hundreds or thousands of views on videos, but on a podcast, you might see like less than 50 downloads, and you have to be like, wow, that's great. Now check this out. If you want to be in the upper half of all podcasts in the world, all you need is 25 listeners per week. I ain't joking, you guys. 25 listeners a week, and you are in the top 50% of all podcasts. So let's go over real quick. Why podcasting? Oh, you do videos. You've been doing YouTube since, golly, it must have been 2010 is when I started the channel. So almost 11 years. I'm an old tuber at this time. And it's one of those where it's like, well, think about it, right? There is right now, if you go on YouTube, man, is it saturated. There's like 15 million active creators on YouTube right now. I mean, it is a whole industry, right? Me, I'm more of a recreational YouTuber, always kind of have been. I mean, I approached it pretty seriously for a while there, but there was definitely a time where I was just like, man, oh man, this could have been something. And then, life. But it's hard, right? Doing YouTube gaming videos for as long as I've done them, and then kind of always seeing that there is there's ebbs and flows, changes and whatnot. And quite frankly, like, I'm 39, right? I started that channel when I was 28. So it's kind of like, man, what a interesting time in life to be like, wow, making YouTube videos in the upper 20s, just barely starting a family. And now here I am 10 years later, and I'm like just killing, like, doing other stuff in life, right? But this is going to be great. I think you guys are going to be quite excited for this. So YouTube and video and podcasting, why? Well, you know what? The primary reason for the video is YouTube. YouTube is nice, but the primary target I have in mind is TikTok. Okay, so why TikTok? Well, if you look at a podcast, right? So here comes the strategy part just to get us kicked off, so we kind of have an overview of what we're looking for, right? This video is going to be like an hour plus long. There'll be very few of you who are going to be like, oh man, let's just sit down and chill. But if you do, great, pull up some whiskey and enjoy. But the trick is here, when you're doing an hour-long podcast, the chances of you finding nuggets that are 15, 20 seconds long, or 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 2 minute long, or I think it's 3 on TikTok, you have a potential for like making 10 or 15 videos just off one of these, which means now I can make 10 or 15 TikToks. And remember what we talked about a little earlier about if you're the fisherman, you want to have as many hooks in the water as possible. This is why you do video podcasting, as well as, let's stay over here, and you can see that we record right here on the Rodecaster. So I've got this recording. So I now have the audio recording at the same time as we're live streaming right up here. Yeah. So we're live streaming. So that way YouTube gets this video. I'm also recording the video on the computer, so that way I can go back and start pulling those clips. And that's kind of the magic here, guys, is we want to have a multi-prong approach to getting us kind of known, right? And that's the real bitch about a new podcast, is just that there is such a depth, right? Like, here's the thing, right? You're trying to get into a very saturated market, but podcasts, not nearly as saturated as YouTube, right? And this is the best part, right? I told you before, there's about 15 million active YouTube creators that are doing, enough to where you could warrant them actually being kind of like a job. But if you look at podcasts, right, you're not even, I don't think it's even past 1 million. And the burnout rate on a podcast is high. People have a lot of things that they like to talk about for only so long, right? And that's the kind of kicker, right? If you do YouTube, like I did, making YouTube videos and making gaming videos, right? New content comes your way all the time. There's always a new game. There's a new console that comes out. There's something else that kind of perks it, right? Because gaming is so broad. You can do all kinds of stuff in gaming that I don't think you can do in many other genres, right? So it's a great medium for constantly getting new influences or new stuff to think about or new things to talk about. But now you have a podcast, and you got to be the person that comes up with the flavor. That's the thing that hoses people more than anything, is that you start getting into this idea of like, oh man, I need to make sure that I am, I had this great idea for a podcast. I did 20 podcasts and now I'm kind of running on empty here. That happens a lot. Okay. So let's start this thing out by going over the most important thing you could possibly figure out, which is, what is the name of your podcast? What's the topic? And what's the direction of the podcast, right? Now, name, this will definitely factor a lot on whether or not you've got what you're passionate about. Let's just throw some stuff out there. If anybody has an idea, I actually am on YouTube right now when I'm filming this. So if you have a question or if you have like a comment or whatever, I'm seeing them live, and we can kind of go that way. But think of like what you're passionate about, because I'm going to tell you this right now, after 11 years of YouTubing, that you have to find a level of passion with what you're doing so that you actually want to give a shit about what you're doing, right? Because I'll tell you this, think about this. If you're in a flooded market, flooded right now, content creators, people are dying for your attention, you need to be able to show that you've got passion and caring well beyond what the normal person is going to bring to the table. Because if you bring any less than your A game or anything less than your fiery passion for something, it doesn't matter what the hell the topic, you're going to lose people. And that's fine, you know, but I think that you got to remember that there's riches and niches generally. So think of your name and think of your topic. It doesn't mean just because you're not into like horse husbandry or something, right? Maybe there might be a podcast or two for that, right? Like Equestrian Times, who knows? But, you know, just think about like what you're really passionate about, like what gets you really hot to trot in that case. So in my case, I mean, I could have done woodworking stuff, right? Like a woodworking podcast. But, you know, the problem with a woodworking podcast for me was it's not my end goal, right? My end goal with woodworking is like, man, I wish I could just get back to just relaxing and not having to do work as a woodworker in order to like pay bills or to kind of afford. Because what I used woodworking for was actually to pay for my MBA class. And that way, but then again, I'm also on this principled thing, right? If you're going to be getting an MBA and you're not using business income to pay for the MBA, you fail before you even start, in my opinion. But then again, I'm a hard ass about that kind of stuff. But let's think about a couple things here. Your name, right, has to match that kind of direction. And if you have a way of describing what you're trying to accomplish with your podcast by the name alone, it's going to be great. So in my case, the Boom Done podcast. You guys have heard me say Boom Done a million times on videos on the channel. So it's like, all right, well, you know, we do this, and then boom, done, right? It's all about effective and efficient. That's what it is. So if I can communicate that quickly with you, then it's like, all right, great. I'm not behind the ball. I'm definitely not going to have to worry about, you know, describing it. And again, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad idea to name your podcast something abstract, right? If that's what you're into, or if it kind of goes with a theme, it'd be like Earth Crystal Time. Maybe it's about energy healing or something, right? My suggestion is I'm not the most, I'm extremely creative, but when it comes to naming and trying to describe stuff, I like to be as cohesive and like to the point as possible. Right. So if your YouTube podcast or whatever it is about like barbecue, if it has like barbecue bros or smoking with barbecue, whatever in there, you very likely people will be able to understand what your podcast is by the name. So that's what you kind of want to get to. Okay. The direction. So in my case, let's just use mine, Boom Done Podcast, right? The name Boom Done is just like, yeah, let's get some shit done. All that. What's up, Maya? It's good to see you, bro. So the topic of mine is everything about effective, efficient work. Generally, you're going to see stuff regarding like methods of work, how to handle different projects, or if there's something related to that. Because my goal and direction with this is I'm hoping to use the Boom Done podcast to be able to kind of get an audience enough with people who are like, man, I could really use a guy who could go into my business and help us make efficiencies or figure out some kind of different procedure to kind of boost profitability, to reduce, you know, tack time, to go look for all these. Because for me, you know, again, I've progressed quite a lot in my career since I started the channel. And the end goal I have is never to be like, oh, I just want to be like a kick-ass employee to somebody. It's like, no, stop that. We want to make sure that like what I'm trying to set myself up is when I get my MBA completed in the spring, that I've now got this podcast up where hopefully I've got some viewers that are like, man, this guy knows his stuff when it comes to being effective and efficient. Why don't we have him bring his consulting company in and help us out? That's the goal. That's the direction I'm taking with this. So everything that I do is trying to point me in that direction, right? Make a big library of content that is basically, if you looked at my library, you'd be like, damn, this guy really is hot and deep when it comes to like project management, trying to figure stuff out. That's my direction and the goal, right? So here's the second one you're going to need to do. Great. You've got a name. It's all good. And you're like, damn, man, this is going to be perfect. What you need to then figure out is what is the URL you're going to use? Because it is a big problem. If you don't have a URL for your content, it's like you're going to be kind of hosed. You're going to be on the back pedal the whole time. Because even if you think like johnnystarlight.com is available, you look and see it's not. that's a huge problem for you, because if, like in my case, right, what I did was I thought, what would be something that would really define effective, efficient? And I say boom, done literally all the time. And most of my friends who know me will say, Bo, you say boom, done every time you crush something at work or you're moving something on. How can you make that into something? I bought the URL, I bought the URL boomdonepodcast.com and found it. So hell yeah. Right now, this is an easy slam dunk. You may have to mess with stuff a little bit to make your name work, but you want to try to make it as tight and clean as possible to the name. And if, let's say, the name and thing you want to do is completely out, you may need to reconsider the name a little bit, right? Like a great example is like Blink 182, right? Great band from the 90s and early 2000s. They actually changed their name because of the URL. Or no, it was Linkin Park. Sorry, it was Linkin Park. So they found a URL and made that URL the band name, and that's where it started. Was they had a URL of Linkin Park, and then moved on with that. So don't discount the power of that URL matching your name. If you can get those two to match, you are super good. Nice. Thanks, brother. Yep, breaking the Skyrim days. That's exactly what I am now trying to do in the business world, is apply all the things I used to break video games to, but IRL. And that's pretty good. So let's see. Style of podcast, solo or group. Now, you don't have to pick one, right? So what you're going to be seeing is actually I drop a podcast every Monday morning at 7:00. And depending on the place you host your podcast, right? We're going to get into that a little bit later, but for right now, I'll just tell you, if you use Anchor as your podcast streaming service, it's free. It's Spotify powered. So you're going to get Spotify, Apple Podcast, and there's like 7 or 8 sources that all of your podcasts gets crapped on every time you release. It's awesome. But you can also schedule those podcasts out. So I did a podcast on Tuesday with a couple of my buddies, and we talked literally about gaming. We talked about what lessons we learned in the world about gaming it was a really fun conversation. So that was a group one. Then most of the time I'll do a solo, kind of like this, where I just have like a very specific topic. I don't really need anybody kind of like playing off me as a foil or asking questions or kind of adding flavor, but it's fun, But I think that you don't have to. Here's one thing I will recommend though. If you base your podcast entirely around you and another person, you need to be very careful who you choose. Okay. Definitely not going to say anything negative, but I'm going to say is if you are the more people you have involved in a podcast, the more opportunity you have for failure. And the more opportunity you have for when stuff stops being fun, right? If your level of grit is different than your co-host's level of grit, you're going to have a bad time, and it's not going to be very fun. And I want you to have fun. That's the whole point in podcasting, is you have to have a reason to do this well beyond money at first, well beyond what your direction is. You have to have some reason that's going to drive you forward, because what you're going to find is there is a large void between where you think you need to be, right? Where you feel you should be and where you actually are, right? Like, I think I just cracked 100 downloads of my podcast like last week, and I'm on episode 13. Okay. So I'll tell you, you definitely, if you're talking about humble pie, right? That's a big slice of humble pie. You're going to have to be ready to start drinking or eating. I mean, you can drink pie if you kind of liquefy it a bit, but you know what I mean? It's just one of those things you're just going to have to kind of be really comfortable with, is you're going to be pushing. Okay. Now, again, you doesn't matter, video podcast, regular podcast, making a YouTube channel, trying something brand new, you're going to have to be very, very comfortable with being uncomfortable. Now, don't let me dissuade you from trying just because it's going to be difficult, but I'm telling you this, okay? When I started in 2010 is a lot different than folks starting today in 2021, at least on YouTube, right? Now, if I would have started my podcast back then, man, that would have been a good idea, but It just didn't make it work. That's just life, right? But then again, it did have some really awesome stuff that came up for me in those time periods. So not that big a deal, but there's a different paradigm. You're going to have to be, you have to be very, what's funny? I'm not even going to say that. You don't even have to be super dynamic. You don't have to be super different. You don't have to be whatever. You just have to be consistent. You have to have a personality. Even if you were talking about Pokemon cards, right? There are a crap ton of podcasts and YouTube channels that talk about Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering or Skyrim or woodworking or barbecuing or whatever, right? You just have to be comfortable in how you approach it, right? Now, if you approach yourself as saying, I'm the next Joe Rogan on day one, you're going to be in for a bad time. That is a whole different level of work that fella does. But then again, he's huge. He's the largest podcast in the world at this point, right? And he's been dominating. If you look at Joe Rogan's strategy, that's a lot of what powered this. Is he used video on YouTube to power visibility for his podcast, right? Ultimately landed him at Spotify, where he was sitting at $100 million or something for that podcast, plus like a deal for a long time. No, like he didn't need the money before then, but now he certainly doesn't need it, which is great. I mean, that's an awesome spot to be in. And there's not anything that says you can't do it, right? You just have to have grit. So grit, if you have never heard the term or not familiar with the term, is essentially your ability to eat shit. I don't know how to say it any nicer, but you're going to have to be an expert shit eater. And anytime you get pulled down, listen to the feedback you're getting, but stay on target, right? So there is going to be a lot of naysayer. It depends on your crew, right? Now, again, for me, I filter my crew very heavily, and I'm comfortable not having everybody be my friend. So if you're the kind of person that dies on the inside when somebody says a bad thing about you or is questioning what you're doing, then you're going to have to put that in perspective of like, why am I doing this? Because if it's to make other people happy other than yourself, or just to be because you find it fun and entertaining, you're going to be like up shit creek without a paddle, my man. All right. You have to find that inner grit, that inner push, because that will really dictate a lot of that style. That style of a podcast, man, is going to be like, are you going to be a hard hitting, loud person? You doing music? Are you doing whatever? It doesn't matter. I will say this, though, again, I'll reiterate. If you intend to start a podcast with more than one person as the key element of your podcast, be very, very sure that you can rely on that person to always have your back and always be there. Otherwise, you're going to more than likely be rolling to a solo podcast at some point in the career. That's why I kind of like the solo one. And then I just bring in people and feature people. So I could bring my wife in sometimes. I could bring friends in sometimes. And actually, one little kicker. I know this is going all over the place. But then again, if you're looking for short and concise stuff, podcast not the thing. Okay? Podcasts are long form. And you're going to have to be comfortable with the idea of like, it's not like an easily digestible nugget. It is on the long run, right? So if you're a podcast listener, you're used to having the host kind of meander through topics and kind of go off a little bit here and there, but pull it back. And that's kind of the fun dance that you get with a podcast opposed to more conventional, like, ready serve video or ready serve products that are like, oh, here's in 1 minute, I can tell you everything you need to know about doing a podcast. It's like, no, you can't. You can't say shit in a minute. Trust me. I mean, I could, but it would be a real disingenuous kind of thing. And that's just basically whoring for views, which, I can't argue with people doing it, but let me show you one cool thing you can do. This thing is called a Rodecaster. Now, you can't see it if you're listening to this on audio, so let me just explain. The piece of equipment that I use for recording the audio for the podcast is on a thing called a Rodecaster. Okay. It's a Australian company. They do amazingly good audio equipment. And the nice part about this guy is if you mix the Rodecaster with this, which is a pod mic, which is what I'm using currently to be speaking into, the two work beautifully together. It has all the pregame, it has all the settings, has everything on here. But more importantly, you can throw sound effects. You could throw whatever you want on here, and it'll record it, and it records it on the machine. So you can literally hit record, do your thing where you're doing your intro,
where there's problem,
right? And start your process, start your podcast, record it, do your outro music, and then have it come in and out, and you're good to go, right? It is an amazing piece of equipment. And the best part is it makes the full file. You don't have to do any editing at all, okay? So if you're the kind of person that's trying to have consistency in your life, and you want to man, I want to do a podcast, but I'm just worried that it's going to be all this editing and all these file transfers and all this crap. With a Rodecaster, you're basically, all you have to do is hit start and record and stop, and hit the record button again to stop it. You'll have a full podcast in the box. You use the cable to export it using a little function. There's a little program that's on your computer. You'll tear down you'll rip the podcast off the computer, off the Rodecaster onto your computer. It automatically makes the file format for Anchor, for podcast, whatever your destination is, and then you're done. You really drag that file onto whichever platform you're deciding to use to host your podcast, and problem solved. You mix that with a little bit of writing up an agenda, which I don't know if you see this. I do an agenda every time, and hey, look at that. Right? There you go. Just write up a real quick little list of what we're trying to talk and accomplish in the podcast. Put that as a description, and then bam, you are done. Right? You literally 5 to 10 minutes, I think it's 10 or 15 minutes after you're done with your podcast, you could have a podcast live, right? Don't discount the value of investing in good equipment, so that way you can make your workflow so easy, because the next thing you're going to need to do is think about number 4. When are you going to release a podcast? You've already gone through, find a cool name. You got that direction going. You got a URL all set up. You know you're going to be doing a solo. Maybe you're going to do a group podcast, whatever. How often do you release a podcast? All right. Anybody in the comments below, let me know what you guys think. If it's, there's none of that on podcasts, unless you're doing it live, like I'm doing it right now on YouTube. There is not going to be any kind of feedback you're going to get live. Okay, so no one's going to tell you, oh, I like this. Da, 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 da. There will be if you decide to do a live stream, kind of like what I'm doing right now on YouTube. But for the most part, you're literally pooing in the void. Okay, so you need to kind of think of who and what is the person who's going to be listening to my podcast, right? In my case, it's my primary target is people who are interested in doing effective, efficient work, project management, that kind of thing, right? So I'm figuring if I release my podcast 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on a Monday morning, I'm pretty much hitting all the time zones generally, right? I'm not going to really go for that. I don't want to be that guy who's like, I'm releasing at 7 in the morning on Eastern Standards. That way, no. Because then it's going to be 3 in the morning by the time West Coast gets it. So I'm saying the West Coast, 7 a.m. in the morning on a Monday, release a podcast weekly. Okay. That I think is a great place to start. Anybody can do one podcast a week, regardless of what you've got going on in your life. Okay. That's a thing I think anyone can accomplish, and it's a very doable. Now, again, because I'm using Anchor as my podcast, that's where I load my podcasts, where they get distributed from. It lets me schedule podcasts. So as I said earlier, I am doing episode 14 now, and this won't be released for another week and a couple days, because episode 13 I already shot on Tuesday with my buddies, which will launch this coming Monday. I think that's November 1st at 7 in the morning. So this one, when the audio, right, when I got this audio over here, burp, 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 that is going to go up and be scheduled out, so it won't be until November 8th when that one goes out. And what is the big deal about that? Well, think about it this way, right? If you get a big bug in your ass and you're like, man, I'm going to make a ton of podcasts all at once, you can make 4 podcasts and you're set for a month, right? And you don't have to think about it, Maybe you get in a big role and you're just like, I'm just going to knock out 4 hours or 5 hours of podcasting in a day because I have the time or whatever. You can do that, right? But you have to be consistent. Here's the big one. Be very consistent. If it's a weekly podcast that always happens Monday morning, 7 a.m., then you need to have that level of consistency. A lot of people, when they're listening to an audio podcast, right? An audio podcast person might, if you're doing a great job, they'll subscribe to it, which means that their service will then automatically download that podcast and put it on their device. So when they're listening to your podcast, you're ready to jam. But they expect, like, well, man, maybe I'm working out on a Monday morning. I want to make sure that I have my Boom Done podcast loaded up, which would be great. But if you don't have that Boom Done podcast at 7 a.m. ready to rock and roll, then they think maybe you're not there, right? Maybe something happened. Like, what happened to Bo and the Boom Done? Don't be that. If you're going to do this, my suggestion would be think and figure that you're going to be in for about 50 or 100 podcasts. That's the number I'm choosing as far as like the seasons go, right? And even then, more than likely, I'm going to keep going because I'm also the kind of guy where I'm just like, I'm already started, I already invested. And if you already didn't notice, now with the video podcasting idea, I also invested in cool stuff like adding these LED lights in the shop. I'm trying to figure out which hand to point to, like these on my clamp wall, or that in my 3D printer enclosure, or this on my table saw. And then these lights, I've got 3 lights. I've got 2 fill and a key light on the top, right? All this stuff kind of is things I had laying around from video stuff, but I'm repurposing and double using the wood shop here as a recording studio, because if you notice, there's not a lot of reverb. There is some, but the nice part is, again, good equipment with a good filter and a good setup here takes care of a lot of that funky reverb you get with cheaper setups. So invest your money in good equipment up front is my suggestion. Also, if you ever decide to do video stuff and you want to do anything where you have like fills or loads, ooh, scary. Oh yeah, mean namaste, here I am. This thing is amazing for that kind of stuff. So you can dial up and down. You can have phones. You could have Bluetooth hookups, all kinds of things on that one device. So if you're just going to do video work too, this thing's a boss. Highly recommended. So you're never going to not use this. And besides, this kind of stuff keeps its value very well, actually. I think I bought this thing on eBay for like $50 less than retail. That's because you could not find them retail anywhere. That's how many people are trying to get their hands on one of these Roadcasters. But anyway, think about when you're going to release that podcast. Try to see if there's a way to sync it with what your topic is. So if your topic is like barbecue or something, you may want to make sure that people generally start thinking about barbecue near the end of the week, maybe. So maybe be a Thursday or a Friday release. Whereas if it's something work related, Monday's a good one, because now people want to get there before their commute to listen to you on their commute. That could be a thing. You'll have to mess with it and kind of experiment. At some point, Apple Podcasts has actually got the best metrics for this. They'll show you kind of when and where people are listening from. The when is important, right? You want to know when people are starting to really peak and listen to you a lot, so that way you know exactly when to release. But you're not going to get those kind of numbers until you're seeing like probably, I mean, for me, you're probably going to need to be in the range of like 20 to 50 active listeners before you'll start seeing enough of the peaks and valleys to know when you're going to release properly. So just pick a point, make it a doable day that you can release on, and try to shoot for 1 a week. That's all I want from you guys. I just want 1 a week. Can we all put our hands on our hearts and do the I'm going to put it on there once a week challenge? That's right. If you're starting a YouTube, if you're starting a podcast, starting whatever, anything on social media, generally, you want to release when you can release. So let's go talk about the fun part, how to market your podcast. So for the first 13 episodes, I thought, why don't I just see if I can just get traction naturally on the podcast, which does work. Okay. I did get to 100 downloads on the podcast naturally, with minimal crossover to this channel, but I'm trying a new strategy now that I'm like, man, I'm enjoying the podcasting. I think it's got some legs to it. All I have to do, whoa, hey, watch out. All I got to do is add the video podcast strategy to it. That's it. We're going to go for, how do you market? Well, we're going to start right now, right here. I'm doing a live stream live on my YouTube channel, right? So that for the whole podcast and a little bit up and back and forth is up on YouTube, ready to listen for anybody who wants to listen to it. It's literally what will be up on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, whatever. And they can jump in, jump out whenever they feel like it. If people want to view it, great. If they don't, it's all good, right? All I'm trying to do is get people to listen, and that's pretty much it. Anchor. Anchor's your number one place I would suggest to put your podcast, simply because it lets you split your podcast out to like 8 different streaming services. So if people listen to it on Apple or any of these others, it's great. It's like a one and done where your podcast goes on one place and then goes out to 8 different outlets. Anchor is the thing you want to go on if you're going to put your podcast up. And then here's the big boy, TikTok, right? TikTok is the one. Now you can do YouTube shorts and that kind of stuff works great, right? You can do that. You want to do YouTube shorts and TikToks at the same time. But again, we're using this long ass podcast as more or less kind of like a place for us to fish out clips, right? We don't want to be dropping ludicrously long clips on TikTok or making YouTube shorts that are just verbose, right? We don't want that. What we want is saying, like this example right here. We already talked about finding a name, buying a URL, what style of podcast, when are you going to release that podcast, and now into marketing it, right? In there are chunks of this big video podcast where we peel out 30-second chunks. And we'll say, you know, how do you market any new podcast? You're going to use YouTube to live stream. And then from that live stream and recording on a local device, you'll now have a video file, and the full YouTube full live stream will be on YouTube. Plus now we add in Anchor, which will take the audio podcast part, the audio file, and stick it in as a traditional podcast. Excellent. But now we marry in the third element, which is the money on top. That is, now we take that large podcast video we've been taking and start chunking it into shorts and TikToks. And now we throw those out. So this one video podcast that I'm doing right now is going to hit on YouTube as a long form. It's going to hit on Anchor as a long form. And now that big long form video is cut into smaller chunks. Because now if I've got 8 different topics with maybe 2 or 3 things that are really relevant, now I've got potentially 16 or 20 clips for TikTok or YouTube shorts all in one video file. It is a gold mine if you want to do the work for it, right? It doesn't mean you have to. But then again, if you've got only Anchor, right? You do your podcast, you stick it up on the audio, that's it. Great. You got one fishing lure. You do the live stream on YouTube and Anchor. Now you've got 2. You do the live stream, Anchor, and now TikTok, or now YouTube Shorts. You got 4 potential endpoints. And of the YouTube Shorts and TikToks, you could have, let's say, 20. So if I got 20 on each, I now have 42 ways of reaching somebody on the same content I already made, right? This live stream, that podcast, everything. If you decide to go down the road of adding TikTok and YouTube Shorts to that podcast, you are massively increasing your reach just from slicing out little chunks from your long form podcast. So that's the trick. That's basically the Joe Rogan trick, is exactly that. It is doing video along with a podcast. So that way people not just getting it from one avenue, you get it from multiple. And this will be an interesting little experiment to see how many I can get out of this one little video. But that's something to think about. I know a lot of people shit on like TikTok as basically just booty shake videos and random crap, but you have to look at the main audience of that thing, right? They're scrolling through. But guess what? YouTube's the same freaking way. Okay? take it from a creator who's been on YouTube for almost 11 years, okay? The attention span is such, if you do not capture somebody in the first 5 to 10 seconds, you lose a huge chunk of people, okay? You're the only one who gives a crap 100% of the time about your content. You have to convince people out there in the world that maybe never even heard of you or understood who you are to say yes to this content, right? A yes enough to listen to the whole thing. That's the killer one. You want to see like the ambition and love, like, oh man, I killed it with this video. Look at like there is like literally a dive that happens after the first minute or two of a video. And it's just like, oh man, it kills you. It kills you a lot. Because imagine that you put a crap load of work into making a full video. Why do you think a lot of those viral videos that you see are like 2 minutes long tops, maybe 1 or 2? Unless you're Mark Roper, a long form video of 20 plus minutes, you're not going to get there because people will fall off within the first 2 to 5 minutes. If they make it past 5 minutes, you're talking your viewer retention rate is like less than 10 or 15% at the end of that video. So one thing I will always tell you, always, because people will leave your video through watching it or leave your podcast through listening to it. If you have something super important to tell people, tell them immediately, right? Hey, this is Bo from the boomdongpodcast.com. Make sure you subscribed and that you're ready to rock and roll. So every Monday morning, you can get more Boom Done podcast, right? We're talking about XYZ. So that's exactly what I did at the beginning of this, right? Hey, today we're talking about the video podcast strategy guide. We're going to cover 8 different things that are going to make your podcast awesome. It's going to be from finding your name all the way to getting a URL. What kind of style of podcast you're looking for? Is there going to be a release schedule that's going to be comfortable for you? And make sure to not forget about the marketing. The marketing is important. You're going to be doing YouTube. You're going to be using Anchor. You're going to be doing TikToks. And then, number 6, you're going to be being okay with low numbers. You know, there's some stuff that you're going to have to deal with on podcasting that is way different than YouTube video. So for me, I'm kind of used to seeing, when I look on my YouTube analytics, it's like, oh, I only did 300,000 views this month. And I don't do shit. You guys know. I think a lot of you who are watching right now are like, dude, isn't it like 11:45 at night, Bo? What are you live streaming for? Well, I'm live streaming simply because, dude, I built up the new wood shop to look like a dope studio, and I felt like really powered up and wanted to do a video to kind of talk about like that and just what's up. So that's why you're getting a podcast and a video at like 11:45 on a Saturday night, because I'm married with kids who are sleeping. This is the time to do it. So there you go. But, you know, you're going to have to be kind of cool with low numbers. You know, when I see 300,000 views that happen in a month, I'm thinking, meh, not the best, but not the worst. And then when you look on my like podcast analytics, I'm just like, 5? I did all that work for 5 people. But you're like, yeah, I did, because you got to get started somewhere. And it's one of those where you're like, I'm really grateful those people are taking a huge risk. There is actually a really interesting concept called leadership bias that happens a lot. Not at the beginning, at the end of when people are jamming. It's at the beginning. They say the best leader you can possibly have in a company or in an area isn't the first person to try something. It's the second, right? It's that one guy who's the weirdo sitting there dancing in the middle of like a concert, who's just having a time of his life. The biggest person you need on your team is that second guy who jumps up and makes an ass of himself along with you, because that shows the world that they're comfortable with your content, comfortable with what you're doing. And then the third person jumps, then the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So embrace the low numbers. These are your most important people when you're starting anything new. Doesn't matter. YouTube, podcast, TikTok, whatever. Doesn't matter. What you're looking for is that first follower, that first person, that first 10 people who see the potential in what you're trying to do and understand the passion and the vibe you got. That's what you need. That's what you're going to have to get to and be comfortable with just doing podcasts literally for like 3 people, 4 or 5 people, right? Because these are actually for the 5 most important people in your life. And now underscore tilde that, most important people to you as a new podcaster are the first 4 or 5 people who consistently listen, because they're paving the way for everybody else to say, you know what, this guy's doing something right. This guy's got an idea and he is worth listening to. So for all of you guys who listen to me on Anchor or wherever you're choosing to listen to this podcast, you really need to understand, I have all the love and affection I possibly can give to you visually, but now I can do it on video about how awesome you really are for supporting a new concept for a podcast. So thank you so much. And you guys on YouTube streaming too, that are listening right now, all 5 of you who bastards are up late at night, I'll take some of this Smoky Joe, put it down my gullet, and say thanks for that. Actually, this Smoky Joe is delicious. Wow. It's really good. So I actually got this, I don't know, those big, huge chunks of ice I can now make. I guess I got like an ice cube tray that makes the huge whiskey rock kind of ice things. And I'll tell you, when you have a real smoky Islay whiskey that's just, whoa, really, really smoky, it actually tastes so much better. You add a little water to it, and it just smooths it out, gives you just that right kind of feel on the back of your mouth and your tongue. Oh, it's so good. Man, do I like a good Islay whiskey. So anyway, we're not going to go down that road because we're talking about being okay with low numbers, right? You got to love those people. Again, I'm going to put it out there to every one of you who wants to start a podcast or wants to do something like this, all right? Think of these as your most important people. Your first listeners, your first followers, your first people to consistently be out there. These guys are gold, okay? And really cherish the fact that these people gave you your time and are now supporting you. So when you do get big at some point, right? Now, I think about some of my guys all the time that were there when I was early, like Earning Attorney was one of my users on YouTube that I always remember and has had fun, and Mel and I, and a whole bunch of guys that I used to start up when I was doing my Minecraft servers or whatnot. We all had a hell of a fun time, especially all you guys that watched all my old YouTube videos on like Skyrim. You know, Skyrim's coming back for the 3rd time in November. It's going to be out for a 10th anniversary edition of YouTube of Skyrim. I can't wait. I cannot wait to see if I'm going to get another like whoop on the viewers because people buying it. I think it's optimized for PS5, but it doesn't mean shit because they never changed the source code ever. It didn't matter what platform that game came on. All of the videos I did about breaking YouTube still worked. I remember going up to Peter Hines, who was the creative director for Bethesda. I was at a press event in San Francisco and I used to live out there. And I remember walking up to him. It was when Skyrim was released on the Switch originally. I walked to him and told him, "You are my favorite person in this entire room." And I just wanted to say thank you so much for not changing a single thing with Skyrim every time you release it, because it makes all my videos 100% relevant all the time. He very awkwardly gave me a handshake and said, thanks, and then walked off. And I was like, yeah, I got it in there, right? That's what you needed. Anyway, so I'm just trying to make the point here, guys, that really appreciate and love those people, okay? If I could give any advice to anybody at any time when you're starting something brand new, is always you need to be you have to be as appreciative as possible of the first couple people you didn't know that then saw you and said, man, this guy's got something going for him. I want to participate, or I want to listen, or I want to be a part of this. That is invaluable, right? And again, I appreciate and care for all of you guys that listen to my stuff, because for reals, okay, at some point I'll go down the road of how this channel saved my ass more times than you can imagine. That's talking about my YouTube channel, in the most awkward ways possible, but just like, I really needed this right now, and it happened, right? Anyway, we'll get there at some point. If you guys are ever interested in that kind of stuff, let me know. boomdonepodcast@gmail.com. That's my the email for the podcast. If you ever have a question, comment, concern, or thing you want to know about, absolutely pop me a message on that email account. Again, all contact information and whatnot is in the description, either on the video or on the podcast or whatever, because that's the whole point of this, is I'm trying to get a connection going with you guys. So let's go on to that 7th thing, right? We're getting there. We got 2 more things to go, and we're jamming. Man, the passion is plowing out right now, and I think you guys can see that. Let's pop over to the new video view. What's up? We got a dabs because I'm a 39-year-old dabbing at fucking midnight on a Saturday. I need some Smokey Joe. Smokey Joe, help me out. Golly, Smokey Joe, that's some good stuff. That's the whiskey I'm drinking. Don't think it's not a dude. That way you guys can see the cool lights, the LEDs and stuff. I gotta tell you, putting LEDs on my table saw was so much fun. I was like, I cannot believe that there's actually places on this table saw that potentially could sit and have LED lights. We'll find out whether or not after I use that table saw for a long time, if the LED, if the double sticky tape and stuff, like doesn't just come flying off of that. It gets wrapped up in my, like the LED strip falls off and gets wrapped in my bandsaw blade or in the blades or some belt in there or something. I don't know yet, but so far I'm actually pretty impressed with this one. I'm probably going to use something like this for a whiskey shelf that I want to build at some point, maybe inside, is have something like that so I can downlight whiskey or do something like that. It'd be kind of fun. Anyway, we'll get there. Don't worry about it. Everything's not everything's just about whiskey in this place. But when you get a little older and you got kids and you have trouble sleeping, it's not the worst thing in the world. And besides, you just need to take one and you're good. So anyway, let's go to the other one. Number 7. What's the end goal of that podcast? What's the end goal of what you're trying to accomplish, right? Now, I'm not saying because you have to end anything, right? What's up, Mr. Goo? Good to see you, bro. It's not because you have to end, right? What I'm trying to say is that you need to kind of think about what are you trying to persuade, right? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish with your thing? Again, I already told you guys that the goal I have here is that I want to be able to say, hey, if you're looking for effective, efficient leadership within a company, within a process, whatever, I have a consulting company specifically set up for doing that, right? Like that's the idea is, okay, you got some stuff that's not working. I'm your guy. I would like to go in there, talk about, like let's say, what would you want to do? Like, I don't know. Like I did one for a fella who did manufacturing, right? And you could look in there and just say, well, are you doing this the most efficient? Are you set up? Is your workflow right? That kind of thing. Like, I'd like to keep doing that over and over and over for different clients because that's the variety I kind of would like in my workday, and kind of that would be really fun. And that's the end goal of this podcast is eventually my hope is that clients and people that I have as customers will come in to the podcast and we can like describe stuff or talk about things or be able to advertise your company on the podcast as well as get some help. And I always throw this out to everybody. If you have like a business issue or something you need to discuss or whatever, send me an email, boomdonepodcast@gmail.com. Let's talk it out. If it turns out that this is something like, well, this might be a podcast item. Again, remember I told you, have good equipment like this Rodecaster because you know what it has? It has a thing for a phone so you can actually set a phone up here into the Rodecaster. So if you had to call you, it could do that. Or I could even use Discord and be able to link in. And I can now have Discord that's powered this. So I can grab the audio off the computer and stick it in here. So if it's Skype, Teams, whatever, right? We can totally do that. Let's see what we got going on now. You really, really consider the direction there. So if the end goal for you is trying to power an idea, power a business, power kind of like a passion you have in life, right? That's kind of what you want to get to. Okay. Think about that when you're doing, like your podcast, because there will be a time at some point, maybe not now, but in the future, where now all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself, you're like, wow, I'm actually getting enough of an audience where I'm able to figure stuff out, right? That's great. That's what we need. That's what the end goal is I want to be able to do that, right? It's like building your own business or building your own consulting company, right? You don't want to build a job that you built for yourself that sucks. You want to do something that is like super passionate for you and something that's going to make you feel super good. Well, if your end goal aligns with that, with your podcast, you're empowering your future every time you do a podcast. You're basically going out of your way every time you do a podcast to cast your net out in the world, right? Putting your passion out there for people to find or people to absorb or to enjoy. Mr. God down in my comments is definitely enjoying all that stuff. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. It's one of those where, you have to mix that passion and that fire you have internally and be able to exude that. If you put that through your podcast all the time and you're super passionate about what you're trying to do, man, I'm telling you, right? You're just going to drive that end reality you have for yourself to fruition. You're going to get something from that. You have to, if you're obviously pushing your way toward a direction where it's like, this is my happy spot, this is my happy place. I want to be able to fly all over the United States, helping people make their lives easier, right? Is it on the accounting side? Great. I've done that for years. Is it on manufacturing? Sure. Why not? Is it in process improvement through software? I mean, that's basically my jam right now, is doing software and projects and all that, right? And it's like, that's what I want to do. Like, I would love to be that guy that goes out of the way to make sure to be like, dude, let's get these people that you have working for you out of a spot where you're going from thinking about, God, the one passion I always have is, why do I want people to do what a computer could do, right? That's dumb. It should be the thing that a person does is creating value, adding creativity, kind of building their lives to be more of these contributors than it is just being a cog in the system, right? But so many people are stuck being cogs because they don't have a freaking clue what to do. They're doing a job, management or other people don't have any kind of path forward, or they think it's cost prohibitive. That's not the point. That's what I want to eliminate out of people's lives, is this whole idea that there's no way in hell that I have to do this stupid job or do this stupid thing for the rest of my life. It's like, no. That's why you bring a boom doner in, to take care of that crap, right? Boom, done. Get that done and then move on. I think that of anything, the one thing I can definitely tell you is that it is super interesting and nice to be able to look at what processes or what things happen and then see how people are connected. So again, for me, my end goal is like, wow, it makes me really excited to think that people can move from doing monotonous, shitty labor into something that they feel passionate and happy about. That's something that just gets me just super interested. So end goal wise, that's my end goal. I want to be able to help contribute and make a little bit of change in the world where people are just like hopped up with the idea of like, well, thank you so much for doing the thing or doing whatever. So again, the last point I'm going to go out to is there a drive? Is there something about that drive that's sustainable to you? Okay. That is the last thing you need to think about, is exactly that, is what you're looking to do. Wow. Okay. Looking at my Jesus. The one thing I will definitely say when it comes to YouTube live or whatever, you're going to have some interesting folk to jump in your comments. Just let them be. They were doing all these nice things and all that. They're just getting a little crazy, but you know what? It's all good. Thank you guys for being on there, but Jesus Christ. Anyway, so what drives you on that podcast, right? What drives you to make this a sustainable thing that you're comfortable doing more than just on a fling, right? That's what I want you to get to, because I guarantee you that whatever you're interested in doing, people are passionate about it, and we've seen this a million times, even on my YouTube channel, right? You guys are watching right now. You're used to me posting crap. You're like, Bo, really? Did you just post a thing about like cleaning a gun or whatever? Yeah. Did you just put a video about how to barbecue ribs? Yes, I did. And I don't feel bad about it at all because barbecue and stuff is delicious. And then I'll throw YouTube gaming stuff on there. I'll throw whatever. It's like, this is what I'm passionate about. I'll see something even like, I think I did a video maybe last month or a little bit ago, which was like how to properly destroy a hard drive. I was going through old hard drives I had in the back of the house, and I was like, if I just did a quick video on this just to show people like why and how you do this, would that work? And yeah, that got like 1,000 or more views from people, I guess, either interested in seeing me destroy stuff or genuinely interested in how to destroy old platter drives. That's the thing. Or a really good video I did was when I had a Subaru, I didn't have the key fob. So I went through and researched, well, how do I add a key fob to my Subaru? And I did the research, figured that out, and said, well, damn, I can make a quick video on this. And I think that video is at like 300,000 or 400,000 views. And that's just how to add a key fob or change the key fob on your Subaru. And again, is that YouTube gaming? Is that related to Skyrim? Is that related to whatever I do, or a Mountain Blade or whatever? No, but it's relevant. And I find if I'm passionate about it and it's something that seems interesting to me, then I'm going to freaking do a video on it. And either people are going to like it or they're not. And here's one thing to remember always when you're doing content or putting stuff out in the world, even if the primary content you kind of do is, let's say, like gardening, I don't know, 90% of your views are coming from non-subscribers. Okay. That's just the reality it is right now on YouTube. I gotta be straight up with you. People are always concerned. They're like, oh, what's your subscriber count? What's your It's like, subscribers were important back in the day, right? That was a good metric. Now what it is watch time. It changes. Again, I'll always say this is that being on YouTube for a long time, it's like having a bipolar schizophrenic boss where you don't know what the hell's good one day or the other. Okay. So you have to always be remembering that stuff you did back in the day may change based on who's in office now on YouTube. So keep your nose clean. Suggestion for you. Let me just throw that out there. Gun content, maybe consider not doing that. And if you do, make it very obvious and not anything related to black rifles. Reason for that was I had the #1 video about AR-15s on YouTube for the longest time, and it got yanked off because reasons. So lesson for you guys from me, even if you're passionate about it, don't do it. If you really are wanting to do long-term views and stuff, that's the thing to think about. So is what you're doing sustainable, right? So in my case, Boom Done Podcast, that is one of those where it's like, shit, this is what I do all the time, is try to find more effective, efficient ways to doing things. Even this thing, right? Even this podcast, before I got started, I went through and researched what was the most effective use of my time so I could crank out the most YouTube podcasts, or it was just podcasts at that point, right? It was like, what could I do for a podcast setup that I don't have to worry about setting up the equipment or dicking around with stuff too much? I could just turn it on, hit a button, and go, right? That's why I went to this Rodecaster. I would research it a ton about different equipment, Zoomcasters and all this, and even just recording on a mic onto my computer using like an XLR input. And I thought to myself, if I have to have the computer on all the time, that means that, I don't have to worry about a computer. I can take this Rodecaster anywhere and I can record anytime. If you do get a Rodecaster, I will suggest to you, you're all good, Mr. Guy. I was just like, dude, really? You're getting a little overboard there, but it's all good. You're forgiven. Not to be rude, I appreciated all those comments very much. I was just like, wow, they were excessive. So moving on. If you do get a Rodecaster, if you get a 256 gig card, which is a micro SD that goes in the back of that, you can do short of 245 hours of podcasting before that thing is full. So think about an hour a podcast is about a gig. Okay. That's about right, depending on where you're at. But this thing is dope. It basically makes it to where when you have to say, I don't want to do a podcast because it's just too much work, then you're screwed, right? You're on the downhill slide into just not doing one because it's hard, and that's what happens too when you do YouTube and stuff, right? That's what happened to me hardcore, probably, I think 2018, 2017, somewhere in that range, where it's just like, shit. But I'll tell you all stories at some point. We'll do a story time on it. It was a lot. There's a lot of shit going on in my life at that point, and it was just like YouTube was the last thing I could think about. And it's relevant. You have to really make sure that you've got yourself a sustainable kind of situation lifestyle wise, right? Like, are you in a place where if you do, like actually one of my favorite channels I used to listen to quite a lot was Wrangler Star, about sustainable living and stuff like homesteading and whatnot. And what changed for me was just like, well, I don't have time for it. And if I did have time for it, it's not relevant to me anymore, at least most of it. I think a lot of the slide happened when you start getting a change of political view and that kind of thing. And it's like, oh man, I really do wish that I could have cared. But again, you'll see it, right? Just like your personal kind of taste change over the years, so does your YouTube's like kind of change, and so does your content, and so does whatever, right? But again, the thing that powers me for doing both YouTube as well as podcasts and all this other stuff is that I care about my viewers and I care about you guys a lot. And I want to be like, shit, if there's something cool or something interesting and I think you guys might be interested in it, I'm going to do a video on it. That's a thing. And I like to do a video when I find it relevant. So in the case of a good example actually was that there's so much fun that I get in my content that when I'm making stuff that maybe there might be some crackback that happens of stuff I did 5-6 years ago. Like I'll have a viewer. This was actually one of the more interesting things that I remember was I did a video on, if you don't know, a Marlin 1022 Model 60. It's a 22 rifle that's semi-automatic, and it's pretty awesome. I love them, right? I've had more than one of them. I don't remember. Maybe it fell in an ocean or something. And I did a video on how to field strip it. And I had a listener comment on that video stating, like, man, I remember watching you when I was playing Mountain Blade when I was 13. And now 7 years later, I'm watching you show me how to disassemble a rifle I got from, and it's like, wow, that's kind of interesting. That would happen, that a viewer of mine was like a preteen teen and then grew up and is now college age or more. And there is relevance between the content. There's a lot of times when people will come out of nowhere and I'll just be like, holy shit, I was doing a video on, barbecue or something like that. And they'll throw a comment on stating like, dude, I used to watch you when I was, 9 or 10. And now I'm just graduated. I'm a freshman in college and just want to say thanks for this. Or even if you're an older dude, right? And I've had a bunch of them where it's like, I used to watch this for Skyrim, but now I'm getting a whole different flavor and it's awesome. And that's something that's really kind of fun. And that's the sustainable aspect that I'm trying to tell you about. When you're doing your podcast, when you're doing a video podcast, you're doing a YouTube channel, you're doing whatever, right? These are things you're going to have to really kind of set your gut in place and figure about like what is the real driver that's kind of kicking you out. What's the overarching goal that you're achieving with your channel or your podcast or whatever, right? In my case, it's a sense of giving and a sense of trying to help others. Okay. Either it's breaking video games, it's doing some kind of woodworky things or whatever. It's one of those where it's like, these are things that everybody, well, maybe if you have relevance in it, that's great. If you don't, then it's like, I can't help everybody, like I can only give of myself what I'm able to. And I think that there's a large element in the giving of information or the giving of advice or the giving of care and love out there in the world that If you take it, great. If you don't, whatever. There's a million sources out there. But all I really hope for is that people really genuinely are finding the stuff I'm doing interesting. If you're not finding it interesting, then at least, figure if there's something that you get from it, then that's all I care about. If I even gave you a little bit of a smile or a little bit of a different idea or a little bit of something, I've hit somebody I would never have hit before, as far as like mentally or having a conversation with or whatnot. Right. And that's important. I think that's a thing that you're going to find real quick that will drive you. Okay. Again, it's going to be hard. There is no discounting how freaking hard it is when you are making YouTube content or you're making podcasts or you're doing anything like that. You're going to be like, dear Lord, you feel like you're on your own a lot of the times. Okay. Like, because generally you are. I got to be fair, right? If you're doing YouTube content, you're doing whatever, a lot of the people that you are really like on YouTube or the people that really do great stuff that maybe they're the only guy doing it, you're going to find out real quick. Those people are sometimes the most sad and most kind of lonely folks there is on the down low, right? Again, it's that whole bullshit with social media of people that give you the smile, but don't tell you about how much pain they have. And I have a lot more respect for people that do show both aspects, that they show all sorts of different flavors of what they're feeling and how they act and how they react and all that kind of stuff. I really do find a lot of trouble when I see a lot of content creators that I really respect that are going out of their way not to really show like the whole picture. Because it's like, bro, again, you share what you're comfortable with. That's what I do all the time too. But it's like there has to be an element there where you can connect to the person, right? But again, the really fun one is you will never know who I am as much as I will never know who you are. But I hope that there's a way of communicating the passion that I have for trying to help you, to try to get you along into a different perspective, a different way of thinking that potentially gives you something of value in the future, or maybe kind of gives you a direction a little bit. I'm not saying I'm like a guru or something, but if you're trying to go down the road of building something from nothing, right? Prepare to eat shit. That's just how it is when you're out there. If you're building a business, you're building a podcast, you're building a whatever, it's just how the world works. And if you can curtail that by getting a lift from a friend or somebody who already has like people out there in the world, congratulations, do that as much as you can. But at the end of the day, you are going to have to find the value in yourself, and you're going to have to find the value that others are going to find in your messages. It doesn't matter what video you do, it doesn't matter what podcast you do. That is what's up. Okay. So, there you go. That's 8 different things you can do for video podcasting. It kind of shifted a little bit back and forth from more of like a cut and dry strategy guide into something more about like kind of a conversation to have internally, right? The thing that's kind of interesting too is it's not necessarily like if you don't follow my formula, you're screwed. It's like no. There's none of that, right? This is more like just stuff to think about, right? You're trying to strategize how you're going to approach this. My suggestion is start very simple. Just do the podcast on the audio. Just do an audio podcast to get started, okay? And then mix in the video. That's what I'm doing. I'm just doing it because I'm telling you, I am screwed as far as how much work I have in my life, especially you mix in the 2 boys, the wife, work, 3 MBA classes in a semester, which I'll tell you this, if you ever work full-time and do 3 master's classes at the same time, you're screwed. And on top of that, guess what? I don't operate 1, but 2, but now 3 businesses. So it's like, oh my God, why? Smokey Joe, where are you, buddy? Here you go. Come here. Oh man, Smokey Joe has been helping me out through this podcast, I tell you. But yeah, let's go review these 8 items real quick, because I think that's kind of interesting to kind of give you guys again. You want to start that podcast, you want to start that YouTube channel, you want to start something new. Doesn't matter, right? Find a name, a topic. Get that direction of that podcast, okay? buy the URL potentially and hopefully if it matches that name you have. So if you picked out the name and you can get the URL that goes with it, super good, right? What style of podcast? Let's definitely make sure that the style of the podcast matches kind of what you can expect. So if you're a solo person, you can expect that you're the only one kicking your own ass to do that podcast. If you got 2 people, you've got one more ass to kick. God help you if you're going 3 or 4 people on a podcast, because you're going to be fighting other people's schedules. And here's the best part. Again, I will say this again. You will lose if you do 2 or 3 people. The weakest link is the person with the least grit. Okay. The second it gets hard and someone bails, you now got 2. The second it gets even harder, which it will, you now have yourself. Okay. So my big suggestion here is if you cannot find something that you're passionate about that you can do yourself, you may want to reconsider where you're going as far as your direction, your end goal. Okay. My end goal is different than me and Buddy's end goal. Okay. But you can always bring them on. That's the best part about a podcast is you can always have guests. Okay. And I love having people that I know that come on and just, we shoot the shit and it's a great podcast. But again, I'm the anchor. Okay. That's the point. When do you release that podcast? Think about your audience and think about the message you give. In my case, it's a business one, so it makes sense to do it on a Monday morning so people can listen, okay? That's good. Number 5, right? We want to see how you marketing this thing. Now, you can do YouTube like I'm doing now with live. Great. That works good. If you got the video aspect together, thumbs up, good to go, right? That's an excellent opportunity to use that avenue. Anchor will be my suggested place you put that podcast, okay? Anchor will go out to 8-9 different podcast venues, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. I can't remember. So you put it up one place, shoots out to 8. And yeah, you set it up one time and you're done. That's the one. Use Anchor, okay? And then TikTok. The reason you do video podcasts is so you can splice the big, huge chunk of podcast into smaller chunks, okay? Small little TikTok chunks, small little YouTube shorts, and you're just adding more fish hooks out there. You're trying to get more people to engage with you and listen to your content. That's how you do it, okay? So be comfortable with low numbers. That's like the 6th one, right? Again, remember, YouTube numbers and podcast numbers are drastically different. If I had to equate it, it would probably be 100 to 1 views for every download of a podcast. So if you're getting 4 to 5 downloads a week on your podcast, it's about the equivalent of 300 to 400, maybe 300 to 500 video views on YouTube. Okay. Do not be dissuaded, because remember, those 4 or 5 people who are now downloading your podcast are your most important asset. Because those people care about what you're doing. They don't know you, potentially. If they don't know you, it's even better, because now you're influencing people with your message, with your passion, and showing value to people that you don't know. And I'm going to tell you this. The first people you start influencing like that, it's like a drug, because you're like, oh my God, this is so awesome that I'm able to talk to people I would have otherwise never talked to before and give them something of value. So don't discount it, right? Definitely appreciate and care for those people, because they are gold. And then you're going to have to be like, what's the end goal, right? What are you trying to ultimately accomplish with the podcast, with the video, whatever? What's the end goal here, right? Do you have an idea? Is it that you wanted to kind of raise awareness for something? Is it because you want to change careers? Is it because you want to do something that's not a little bit, it's different, right? Think about that end goal. In my idea, it's so that way I can jump around to different industries, try different ways of helping people use better use of their time. Boom Done Podcast is specifically made for effective, efficient means of figuring stuff out. Okay? That's what I want to be doing with my life. I want to make sure that people are valued, right? Not because of what they're doing currently, but because what they're able to do, what they could be doing. Let's take those people and give them, I would like to move people from what they do to why they do. That's what I really want to accomplish. If I can get people from what to why, I feel like I've really done a lot of good work. So, and then the last little bit there is remember what drives you, okay? And how is that drive sustainable? Because when you have, a bad week, or you've got some crap that's going down or whatever, right? Are you comfortable enough to talk about people to your audience about that stuff? Is what you're talking about a topic or theme or whatever that you do not have a lack of stuff to talk about? It's huge. That's a thing that you have to really consider, is that if you don't have that level of passion for what you're talking about, imagine you have to do 50 to 100 podcasts about that topic. Okay. 50 or 100. And if you can get to that point and you're still passionate, boom, dude, you're rocking and rolling. And that's how it should be. And that's what I hope you are going to get to. So I think what we can do here is we're going to wrap this puppy up. But think about this, guys, okay? I want you to get out there and do something. Even if you don't want to do a podcast, you don't want to do video, you don't want to do whatever, that's fine, okay? Take these lessons and think about it in your head about, well, what am I passionate about? Like, what does drive me? What end goal do I have? You could take this same list, minus out the video podcast part, and apply it to yourself, and you'll be surprised about how much you're going to achieve and think about just from those little points. So I think here we are. Boom, done and up to the time. Thanks again for watching, guys. Again, hit me up at boomdonepodcast@gmail.com. If you have any kind of feedback, suggestions, or whatever, that's the email of choice. Otherwise, check out how to contact me in the description below, and we'll see you on the next one. And that would be the audio version. Now all done. As you see, the little green button is now good to go. My little dealy bopper is all finished up. And jamming and rocking and rolling. So there's the audio done. Now the audio is sitting around in that thing. I can now pull that off, stick it on the computer, and have it up in action. No big deal. Now for the video podcast aspect, we're going to go ahead and get this thing shut down soon. But for the 5 of you guys who have been watching and all the others that have stopped in and out throughout this, I really do appreciate you guys watching. I know this is a little bit of a departure and a little hella late at night, but I think you guys are going to find real quick that, again, all of you guys who have been watching me for so long know I just kind of go all over the place. But I really want to say thank you for helping me out. Let me know if you see anything in the comments. Like, let me know, what did you think? Was the audio quality good? Did you like the LED lighting and all that? It's kind of just a different flavor. Was the change of scene kind of distracting, or was it kind of more engaging? I'm trying to get some ideas as far as that. And again, the nice part about all these LED lights is they can change the color to pretty much whatever. So I'm just experimenting. But I do like that orange color, this one, on the Powermatic, because all Powermatics should be yellow, because that's just how it goes. And again, I'm just reusing the shop as a means of having a 2-for-1. So I have a recording studio for podcasts, video podcasts, and also can do woodworking. And then this thing up here, if you're interested, is a laser engraver. So that's what that is. It's not there's nothing growing out of that. This is literally like a 4-inch pipe that goes into my door so I can exhaust out when I'm doing laser cutting or engraving. But anyway, I just kind of want to get a flavor for what you guys thought. If you guys made it this far, for the love of God, tell me about how amazing you are and how much of a bro you must be for helping a brother out. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are probably Europeans, because it's like 12:30 at night on a Saturday evening on an unannounced live stream, which is like the best thing. Why go through and announce a live stream for people so they can understand that you're going to be online? Don't want to do that. You want to do it live, baby. So anyway, thank you again, guys. I sure appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts, comments below, and we'll be jamming out. We'll do some more of these if they're fun for you. And